What is patent? Now, patent is a form of protection that you would get if you have made some form of improvement in the field of science or in the field of some technology, right? So which means to say that patent protection you can get patent protection only when you have some kind of an innovation in the field of science or technology. Many a times we get this question that, okay, I have made some kind of a business improvement, or I have some kind of a very, very unique business model. Can I actually protect that business model? Or can I actually protect a certain way of doing business? The answer to that is no. There is actually no form of protection for business methods or business models. There is protection only for improvements that are made in the field of science or technology. So, which means to say that for something to be protected under patents, the improvement that you have made or the innovation that you have made has to somehow fit into some form of science or some form of technology, right? So, when I talk about technology, it could be, let's say, mechanical, electronics, it could be computer science, it could be, let's say, telecommunications, so on and so forth. And when it comes to science, it could be, let's say, pharmaceuticals, it could be biosciences, a wide range. So essentially, there is a very broad range of what can be referred to as science and technology. And as long as whatever you have come up with falls within that particular broad range, then you can attempt to patent that particular improvement. Now, when we talk about patenting, there are certain requirements for one to get a patent granted, right? So the key requirements are what is called as novelty, second, non-obviousness, and the third is what is called as enablement. Now, let me talk about each of these things in greater detail. The first and the second requirement, the novelty and the non-obviousness requirement, is essentially judged based on what is already known to the public across the world. So what it means is that whatever technology or whatever improvement that you have come up with has to be new, and it has to be not obvious in view of what is already known in public domain across the world. So typically we tend to get these questions that, okay, there might be something existing in the US, but however, nobody has actually done the same in India. Can we actually now go ahead and patent it in India? The answer to that is no. For anything to be patented, it has to be considered as an invention. And for anything to be considered as an invention, it has to be new and it has to be not obvious in view of whatever is existing across the world, whatever is known in public domain across the world. So essentially, the requirements of novelty and non-obviousness is just based on what is called as prior art. This is a typical word that is used. Now, prior art is anything that is known in public domain across the world. Now, what is novelty? Novelty is more of a one-to-one comparison. So let's say we take your technology and then there is another technology that is existing and we compare it one-to-one. Now, when we do a one-to-one comparison, as long as your technology has some difference compared to this other technology with which we are doing a one-to-one comparison, your technology is said to be novel, as long as even if there is a slightest difference between them. On the other hand, the non-obviousness requirement is a much more challenging requirement to actually meet. Now, what it means is that we are now comparing your technology with a bunch of technologies that are existing. So, which means to say that we are now looking all the different technologies that are existing as a combination. And in view of this combination, the question that we are asking ourselves is that, is this new technology that I have come up with, is it going to be considered obvious in view of the other technologies that are already existing? Now, this is a more subjective kind of requirement, and it requires somebody who kind of understands the patent system to actually give some kind of an answer that might be close to reality. So, having spoken about novelty and non-obviousness, now let me move on to the third requirement, which is called as the enablement requirement. Now, enablement requirement essentially means that when we go ahead and say that, okay, we want to get protection on my technology, and to do that, we have to file what is called as a patent application. Now, this patent application is essentially a technical document plus a legal document that describes your technology in such detail that somebody who is actually from your field should be capable of actually practicing that particular invention or practicing that particular technology. So essentially, the way the patent system works is that you disclose everything about your technology, put it out in the public domain. Now, the patent office of that particular country will now analyze this particular document, try try to identify references which are there in public domain, and try to judge whether it is novel and not obvious in view of whatever is there in public domain. And thirdly, they see whether you have actually provided sufficient details in that patent document that would enable a person from your field to actually practice that particular technology. So what it also means, if I were to put it in the other hand, is that ideas, so to say, very abstract ideas, so to say, cannot be patented. It has to be a technology which has been worked out in a lot of detail so that we can actually put all of those details in the patent document. And if you do that, in exchange, if it is identified that it is relevant, you get a set of rights. So which so just to give you an idea as to an invention that is, or a technology that is enabled and a technology that is not enabled. So let's consider that, let's consider a machine learning or an AI based recommendation system. So if I were to put up a document saying that, okay, I want to get patent protection over any system that can provide recommendation based on your previous, let's say, purchase history. A patent like that or a technology like that, if it were to be presented in that fashion, would probably find it extremely difficult to patent. On the other hand, let's suppose we put up in the patent document as to how we are going to, mine that historical data, exactly how we are going to select certain aspects of that historical data, and essentially how we are going to derive certain insight, and from there, how are you going to provide certain recommendations. So here you are going into a lot of detail, essentially enabling a person who is from your field to actually implement a technology of that nature, which means to say that technology is enabled and it might meet all these requirements of patentability. Now, if at all it is judged that all these requirements of patentability are met, then you will get a patent granted. Now we move on to the third one, which is the scope of protection that you would get, right? Now, if you get a patent, the rights that you get is essentially what is called as a monopolistic rights, which means to say that you have the right to exclude others. So if you get a patent granted, essentially you will be able to exclude your competition from actually practicing that particular technology, which results in the competitive advantage in the market, so on and so forth. Next, the rights, the monopolistic rights that you get is actually jurisdiction specific, which means to say that if at all you were to, let's suppose you apply for a patent in India, the Indian Patent Office, while deciding whether a patent should be granted or not, is going to judge whether your invention is new and not obvious, considering everything that is there across the world. But when it grants you the rights, it will grant you only for India. So which means to say that if you have a patent in India, you will only get those monopolistic rights within the jurisdiction of India. So in other words, you will have to apply for patents in each and every country where you wish to have those kind of monopolistic rights. We will be speaking about how we go about filing patent applications in other countries and what are the implications, so on and so forth. Now moving on, coming to the registration part of it. Now patent protection is not automatic. So, in other words, just because you have come up with, let's say, some kind of an improvement, some kind of a breakthrough innovation, or even if a small improvement over some technology, does not mean that you will automatically get those monopolistic rights. To get those rights, you will have to apply for a patent. So, which means to say that getting the registration is a mandatory process. So if you want to have those rights, you will have to apply for a patent and get that patent granted, right? Second thing, you'll have to apply for a patent even before you make your technology public. In some jurisdiction, you do get certain grace period of about a year. So let's suppose you go ahead and launch your product, you get 12 months period within which you need to apply for a patent. So that's something like US. US has that grace period. But for most other jurisdictions, let's say India, Europe, and most other jurisdictions, there is no such leniency, which means to say that you will have to apply for a patent even before you make your product public. So that's an extremely, extremely important requirement to meet. Third thing, the term of the patent. So once you get a patent granted, the term of the patent is 20 years. From the date of applying for a patent, from there onwards, it's a 20-year term. So after 20 years, anybody is actually free to go ahead and copy that particular technology. So that's about the term of the patent. Now, what are the benefits? Yes, as I mentioned earlier, you get monopolistic rights. So, which means to say that there are certain features or certain aspects of your product which only your product will have, and nobody else can have that kind of a feature or that kind of technology built in. Which means to say that you can have improved margins for your product because nobody else can come up with those kind of features. You might also have better valuation if you are a startup because you have certain patents applied for. Typically, patent grant might take some time. So even if you have applied for a patent, it does play into the valuation of your company. That also helps if you are a heavily tech driven business, so on and so forth.